A lot of people talk about changing your life in 6 months. And, it sounds kind of crazy to think you've spent all these years, not achieving anything. Then all of a sudden you wake up one day and within those 6 months, things are actually going to start changing. Sounds crazy, right? Sounds unrealistic. However, that's the whole point. Success is something that most of us just think this is for just some people. When you get older, you realize all of a sudden, it's actually not that easy. It's not like how we thought about it back in school, where we thought, we're all going to make it, we're all going to become these crazy successful people, have those crazy cars and live those crazy lives. However, it's not that easy. And you come to the realization only later in life, as you mature and you grow older and you get some experience, like, damn, it's not that easy actually. And the main cause people, are not successful is actually their habits, and the reason people are successful are their habits. So that's why I actually agree with the concept of changing your life in 6 months, because it gives you 180 days, to make tiny changes. How the whole point, to change your life is actually by changing your habits. That's the main thing, because what you do on a daily basis, determines your future. So what you do today decides your future. So just look at your day today. What did you do? What time did you wake up? Did you go to the gym? If you didn't go to the gym today, don't wonder why in 6 months, you're not going to have a six-pack or, be that fit person that you want to become. So that's the kind of mindset you need to have when you think about these things. It is, who do you want to become? And then define the habits that bring you there. And then you have 180 days, to get there. And in 180 days is more than enough, with small, tiny actions on a daily basis. So what I want you to do is, I want you to, like I said, define the person who you want to become, Think of other people as examples, all right? If it's not something that's easy for you to define. So think of a person right now in your head. Who do you want, do you look up to that person? And then think, why do you look up to that person? And then think, what traits does this person have? So what are their habits? What do you think their habits are on a daily basis? What do they do? What time do you think they wake up? Do you think they go to the gym? Do you think they, how many hours per day do they work? And then it kind of tells you what you need to be doing. And then you start doing those things. That's how you get started. That's how you know what you need to do. Because a lot of times, we all have these ambitions. We have those goals. By the way, all people have goals. It's just the difference of having the goal and actually achieving it is putting in the work and the action. But a lot of people don't actually know what they should be doing. So they're just sitting there, they have those sparks of motivation where they're just like, they want to do something and they don't really know what. And then their work is kind of like inefficient, doesn't really result in anything. And I'm guilty of that myself until the point where I realized I need to work on my habits and I need to really stick to them and be consistent. Because if you do something every day for a certain amount of time, you're going to, achieve whatever you wanted to achieve. So if that means I want to start a business, if every day I put in a little bit of hours or, a bit of time every day to work on that specific thing, or, just learn a skill maybe. If every day you put in 30 minutes just to learn how to, use a camera, whatever, you're going to become a pro in that after some time. The only difference between the ones who make it and the ones who don't is the losers quit. That's the whole difference. The losers quit, the winners kept going. That's all it is. It's not nothing else. It's not about talent. It's not about intellect. It's none of that. The difference is the winners kept going. The losers, they quit. And that brings me to one thing that I'm guilty of myself. So I used to start businesses and I used to, I'm very entrepreneurial and I used to always think, I want to be a businessman, do this and that. And too many times I failed. And I was quite young, I moved to Dubai with 20 and, figured things out, made a lot of mistakes. But at the end of the day, my main issue was changing businesses. I would try one thing and it didn't work out right because things just take time, you need to fail to learn. The problem was with me that I would just, change the business. I would think, maybe this is not the right project or business to work in. And then I would start something new and I would keep resetting my timer, right? So every time I would reset, it's like, you're heading in a direction. And if you keep going, eventually you're going to reach that destination, right? Like obviously there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be, things you stumble across on the way that you have to deal with. But eventually, if you keep going, you will reach your destination. The problem with me was that I would change the destination and then I would just, keep moving around different ways, not really, getting anywhere, and that's what happens to a lot of us. So the key takeaway out of this is to actually define what you want to be or who you want to be. Write it down, really take the time, and then define the habits. What do you need to do in order to become that person or, achieve those goals? And then you write down what you have to do on a daily basis. And then what's going to define whether you're going to win or not is that you're just going to keep going, right? You're not going to give up. Most likely, you're not going to even see results the first 3-4 months. Because usually when you're doing something right, you don't get to see the results out of it right away. It takes time, So you just have to believe in it. Because if you know those are the right habits that you're doing and you're doing the right things, then that means that's part of the process, You just have to be consistent and patient enough to just stick through and follow through to the end. Like the whole point is not to, be perfect throughout these 6 months. The point is to be consistent throughout these 6 months because consistency beats intensity. So don't think about, I'm going to be, putting this much more work in on this weekend and then, later I can maybe chill a bit or, take it more easy. No, it's about taking small steps. Take it easy every day, but put in the work, put in the hours, put in the commitment that you gave to yourself. Just going once is not going to make a difference. You have to keep going. And that's really all the difference. The simplest example is the gym example. The bodybuilder. You can literally see the results, but find a bodybuilder, ask him how long it took to get there. He's going to tell you, hey, I was at the gym every day. Well, that tells you what you need to be doing in your work, in your business or whatever. Right? You just need to stick to it. If the bodybuilder would have given up, it's like he didn't maybe see the results at some point fast enough, then, he wouldn't be where he is now, but he followed through, and that's all the difference. So it's the same with anything in life. If it's your career, if it's your physique, if it's, anything, skills, whatever. If you want to be someone, you have to put in the work and you have to define what that requires you to do on a daily basis. The most dangerous part is actually not being able to see the results for a while. So, you're just going to get started. You're not going to have any results. You're going to start your business. You're not going to get any sales the first couple of months, and it's going to discourage you. And that's what most people, makes them give up because they just don't see the results and they didn't believe in it. The whole thing is usually get the results way later. Every action that you're doing is accumulating to something that at the end of the day only we get to experience. So what I want you to take out of this video is to first of all, define your identity. Who do you want to be? And define the actions, the habits basically. Stick to those habits long enough and then just keep going that way until you reach your destination. Don't change or don't reset within those 6 months and you will become a different person, whatever goal you set yourself to achieve.